What's up, guys? So, back today, I'm going to start recording videos again, and I'm going to tell you why Terrence Howard is correct. And that's basically because he is accurately representing the nature of the two primary forms of evidence that we experience in reality, which is quality and quantity. And he is correctly placing them in a proper arrangement of hierarchical arrangement, which is that qualitative experience comes first, quantitative experience comes second, right? That sounds so abstract, and it is, but the fact that the reason why we are stuck in a few dead ends in our thinking and basically in our world is because we are accepting that we must be driven and reflective upon certain key principles of truth, right? Which we built up over the past, say, few hundred years in science. But what we haven't done is reflexively taken the new information that we've gathered with the new tools we built and the new observations that we made, and then gone back to the key base presuppositions of our actual scientific framework, logically speaking, and seeing if it makes sense, which it actually doesn't. And fine, you can hear me just some guy on the internet saying whatever, that I know better than everyone in science, but it's not that. I'm making this video now because actually the second interview's come out with Terrence Howard, which if you're interested in this topic, go and watch it, with Patrick Bet-David and a Chinese scientist who's basically corroborating everything he's saying. When I start explaining all this stuff, it's totally understandable why Chinese scientists would be able to think in the same way and see the same problems that Terrence Howard is seeing, because they're operating in a different recognition of the two differing relationships between qualitative experience and quantitative reasoning and logic. And also, if you're just listening and reading between the lines, you'll see how you can actually start to really expand your understanding of life, and also get to a point of being totally confident in your judgments, because you are working with the principle of truth that is within us. We have an insane and absolutely inexpressible wealth of knowledge, just by nature of how our conscious mind works, and our ability to perceive things, and the non-stop continuous accumulation of data, reflexive arrangement of relationships that happens of what we call unconscious, but it's really more like inexpressible. And when I say unconscious, I don't mean like repressed desire stuff. I'm talking about the way that what we call intuition, which has become a pejorative term because of the hierarchical structure of information systems that rule our world, and will change naturally because of the way that technology has allowed this dissemination of information, and this free now the ability for people to get in front of each other, and to where we can all judge which actually works. What I say about Terrence Howard is that I say he's probably correct, right? And I say probably because the only way to know is to see if his technology works, which I think it will, and I'm pretty certain that it will, because he's using the mind properly, based on his non-affiliation with any his life, and in terms of his material comfort, his family, does not depend on whether or not he's correct, right? I mean, maybe you could say it does, but my point is that many points, but starting with this, the reason he faces so much resistance is because there's a whole class of people who essentially make their living and are their material life, their survival instincts are connected to the things that they're saying being true, and that goes so deep inside the psyche that there's no way that people are going to actively say, oh yeah, actually, the stuff that I've been working on for 30 years, that thousands of people come to learn from me, that I have the basically my whole position in life depends on me being able to say that this person's wrong and I'm right, so you should listen to me, and keep on giving me money to stand in front of you and tell these people the same thing and repeat the same lectures over and over again. Is that what I'm saying is true, or that it has validity? And if you go and reassess the foundations of science that were laid like 300, 400 years ago, before we had so much information and computer processing abilities to model reality and to then observe the patterns that occur over time. If the people who made these theories at that point were sitting where we are today, then they wouldn't have made them the way they made them. But we've built up very usefully, obviously, in certain cases, not necessarily in the theoretical aspects of science, but in the material and proactive, pragmatic applications of it. They're very useful. But it also should be recognized that a lot of the most foundational technological achievements and advancements have been made discoveries that were actually at the time technically not possible by the theories. Things like the semiconductors. The semiconductor or the transistor or one of these things has this electron jumping process that should have been impossible, that they had to then theorize how it's possible. But it's the basis of the technology that's changed everything. And so what we have is a double aspect thing. We have theories that are not perfectly aligned to the information that we have, and then we have a bunch of people, like we have a whole culture whose survival is dependent on ideas and the way that those ideas are perceived, and then the normative or what's the word? I'm going to use normative. You can look it up. The normative implications of their theories and the way that society, people are supposed to act by norms dependent on the definition of what their ideas mean. So the idea of a scientist who works in a university being the top professor, and the idea that what he has is true, means that people should act towards him in a certain way, and that protects his children and his friends and family and stuff. So it's totally understandable. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just you have to understand human nature and game theory and think, all right, well, if this person's life depends on it, then obviously they're going to react in a certain way. They're not going to be so willing to say, like, undermine their whole theory and go back to the drawing board because they want to know what actually is right, because they're not in that position anymore. Like, that's where it starts, right? And that's why there are a lot of very sort of noble people working in these areas, and because it comes from a noble, these people wanted to know the truth so much so they went all the way to the top of the truth game that they saw. But then that puts them in the position where now they're in the survival game that's dependent on that, which is why independently wealthy or people who are business people or have their own things going but also want to know the truth tend to come up with the groundbreaking theories, because it's not, they have the ability to see it because their survival instincts are not triggered. So that's a pretty elaborate and pretty thorough preamble to the point, right? Quantity and quality. Okay. The best way to put this, right, is think about the way that animals live, right? Think about like falcons, that they can dive 100 miles an hour, they pull up at the last minute without dying. They do it all the time. These incredible feats of actually understanding, because what they're doing is these real-time calculations of the actual nature of the way that wind works and the way that light works. So all these things, the mind as an animal mind is constantly, our minds, constantly absorbing information and computing it, right? And developing accurate models of the way that reality works in terms of the interaction of the different forms of forces and elements in a way that is applicable, so much so that you can act on it, right? Because I mean, a really good example of this in the human is when you look at really good like musicians or sports players, or you yourself, if you try and do these sort of these highly skilled acts that require this kinetic understanding. If you start thinking about how to do it, then you can't do it. It's you can become very good, but as soon as you start trying to explain how you're doing it, then it becomes more difficult, because we move from one form of understanding into the symbolic form. This is the divide between the qualitative understanding, this is just the only word for it. This is something that we need to grasp and then work on elaborating more, so that it's clear enough that everyone can, because we're in a mess. The world's in a mess because our thinking is not quite right. So we have this understanding, right? This is the basis of all of our understanding, and it's far more, far infinitely more valuable and vast than what we can express in language, and than what we actually have in our linguistic, the whole set of words and meanings and concepts. The information of just like probably like a 12-year-old that they've accumulated over those 12 years of life, which is how many seconds of processing trillions of pieces of information every second, and constantly analyzing and updating and understanding the way that all this works. So how this relates to Terrence Howard, right? I'm going to have to speak a little bit about Bergson, right? Because Bergson made a critique in 1920 or a little bit earlier about where he basically drew this out and said, look, the reason that we have these problems in our thinking is because we're not properly epistemologically representing the primacy of qualitative information and quantitative information, and seeing that quality is primary, right? And what that just means is that we're looking at the words that we create as the truth, right? Failing to see that the experience underneath them is the truth. And watch this new interview with Terrence Howard, right? And watch the way that his mind is working, because when he talks about the reasons why he wanted to go and explore these different things, is that he said, I can see that it's not true. And what I'm trying to get at is that we all can do this. We observe the nature of reality. We know in your mind, you can imagine right now what happens as if you put a sponge in water, right? You can't explain in physics, physically and all this stuff, the actual processes that go on, but you in your mind can literally represent and you can inquire into what will happen if you do X with Y in terms of the physical properties of the nature of reality, and even with human behavior, in a way that is linguistic. Like, in order to go and explain all the stuff that you have the capacity to do in your mind is very difficult. When you start focusing on the deeper part of your understanding. So that's how it's working, right? And if you look at what Terrence Howard has done, is that he has been focusing on this aspect of nature, recognizing that this is the most useful part of our mind, and then also is great with symbolic language. So he's then gone to try and understand where this is in theory and why this doesn't fit with theory, because he's seeing the two things as separate: the real understanding of the nature of reality, which exists in a different form, and then our symbolic understanding of it. Okay, so that's why what he's saying is correct, right? And very likely, like when he makes these weird statements and talks about mathematics being wrong and stuff like that, it's because he's operating on that principle, right? Why is it a Chinese scientist understands it? Because in Chinese language, right, they use pictographic language, and their fundamental philosophy works on these. They're metaphors, right? But what is a metaphor? But it's an actual. It's an image of a living thing. Like, Chinese philosophy uses elements. They use the nature of elements and classifying different phenomena within the realms of certain elements in order to create a different way of expressing information that gets to a whole different nature of reality. And it's not that it's a different reality; it's that they have a different way of classifying the information so that they can talk about it. Which is very useful, and I would recommend getting involved with that if you're someone trying to expand your mind. It's taken me years to get my head around it, and I've studied with a proper master, with a Taoist priest who was trained for the thousands of years of. He's got the lineage, and it takes a while for us to get our head around, because we're looking for these symbolic versions of truth, and so we can't. There's something you have to let go of first, and that primary thing you have to really get in your head is start looking in your mind. It's not the imagination, not like imagining a unicorn, but although if you imagine a unicorn, how it would actually be, you could create an accurate depiction of what a unicorn's horn would actually be made out of, and how it would feel, and how it would touch, like what it would be like to touch it. It's like Blender. There's this Google AI thing that models physics. We have Blender in our head, and it works, and it's that's where all the information is. Now, I hope this is clear. The reason why his theories are so profound and also hard to grasp at first, and why Eric Weinstein says, "Oh, I can't understand the way you think," and shit like that, is because Eric Weinstein, or someone who's been conditioned, it's a form of conditioning to go into the academics and to get to that point, is so far into the symbolic understanding that it's like you have to tell yourself that these things are true, in order to hold it in with enough certainty that you can be in that position, right? It's a training program, and there's nothing wrong with it. Like I think there's a noble energy behind it, right? But it's turned into something that is basically based on survival, and it's like a fucking gang group, guys at the top, like keeping people out and stuff by using big words. But when someone like Terrence Howard comes along, who's operating from this other form, but this is like common sense. It's called common sense, right? And it's like all the intellectual arrogance in the world is just based on needing to protect. And it's not, I mean, it's not bad. It's like understandable. It's like, fuck, if someone comes in your house or trying to take your job, or you got kids and stuff, it's just what we do. And we also need to recognize that, like, this, even the smartest person in the world, who's some divine being, is still human in this form at this time. So they're still gonna act like a fucking animal in certain cases when the animal needs to act. So that's that. Just wrap it up. If you want to become a lot smarter, right? If you want to, if your goal is to really grow in your understanding, then I suggest that what you do is you start using your imagination, but not like in this fanciful way. Again, imagination's become a pejorative word, intuition's become a pejorative word, but this is the basis of all knowledge. But start, whenever you're reading something, whenever there's something you want to understand, instead of looking at the words and thinking, what does that mean? Build the picture in your head and see if it works. And it's insane. Like, it's insane, life-changing. And if you look at anyone who's involved in online business, anyone who's involved in anything like that, if you look at the people who succeed, who make a new system of something, like even if it's just like marketing, whatever, these people who make new systems, what they're doing is they're approaching life in this way. There's an insanely good technique for it, which maybe I can share on here, which is the ancient Roman way of learning, which once you learn will totally change your life. But I'm not going to get into that now. My point is, Terrence Howard's correct because he's actually seeing reality as it is, because he's approaching it from a his life isn't depending on it. He's fucking rich anyway. It doesn't matter. He wants to know what's true because he can see that it's errors in thinking that are causing the problems in the world. And so he's looking in his mind and saying, how does this all work? Because it's in physics as well. It's really interesting because we have this really complex physical understanding of the way reality works. Language is the aberrant creation. Language and symbolic language is a creation. So it's secondary. But what you see is that on the whole in the academic, which I'm not saying is bad. I think I had the greatest times of my life in university. I did leave though for this problem. I saw this. I was like, well, I'm studying radical politics and philosophy, but at the same time, I'm forced to put this structure on it. Like, if I want to become a professor, I'm going to have to grade people based on these things. And I'm talking about to teach like radical theories in the structure of a university is a contradiction in terms. So that's why I left, but also because I'm interested in the truth and not in and you can see to a point that it's limited by these other factors, which are just human factors, which is fine. And I'm not saying it's bad. And I'm saying, like, I think the way it's not, I'm saying abolish the universities. What I'm saying is that we have to see where game theory comes in, right? Like, this is why Nietzsche is amazing. You have to see where game theory comes into the knowledge game, right? And see also that if you want to analyze and assess the truth of stuff, that you need to look at the deeper understanding that you have, which is a product of the deeper mind. People give it crazy names, but it's the pre-linguistic understanding, and it's far beyond what we can put into words. It's the essence. You know, people say higher self and this and that. It's not higher self and lower self. It's just the conscious being, and then the linguistic concept. And we tend to live now in the linguistic concept more in this culture than in the actual being. That's it. So yeah. If if you like it, please subscribe and comment and stuff, because I haven't been on here for 4 months, and so I'm like getting zero reach. I put out 2 new books, and no one's probably watching this, but I don't care. They're sure super cool and very worth reading, because it's the same sort of thing. I'm not Terrence Howard, but it's the same idea. It's like if you take the new understanding, complexity theory, and computer modeling of fractal geometry, and then you apply that back to base understanding of like, ontology and stuff like that, then you get some super interesting results, which lead to some really interesting models for like social organization and stuff like that. I'm just did it because like I've been obsessed with this for like 15 years, and like I have to I have to put some completion to this, so I'm just going to put it out there. Don't care if it works or not. I'm doing this for people who are interested in knowing, because I love the shit. So if you're still watching, just put a fucking 1 in the comments to say. All right, cool. See you next time, man.